Next In.
Welcome to Next In. I have co-host Shane, myself. Shane's the CEO. I'm the COO of Next Level, a staffing and recruiting agency in the gaming and tech space here in Nashville. You guys have seen us a ton. This is not about me. We have Donnie Hasseltine. Did I say it?
Hasseltine.
Hasseltine. Oh, I tried really hard. All right, so I screwed it up. Hasseltine, he's the CEO of Package Cloud currently and the Chief Security Officer for Xenon Partners, a VC firm. Even to me, more exciting, and the part Donnie has no idea that we're headed in, which I'm really interested to talk about eventually, we'll get there, is he is a fellow at the Hoover Institute. So a lot of stuff going on, and instead of listening to me talk, Donnie, tell the world a little bit about your journey, because as you said, a little bit of alphabet soup. It's kind of gone in a lot of directions. You have an awesome background that is not a virtual background that kind of shows off that you're a veteran and pretty cool stuff there. So just tell the world a little bit about your background and how you got to the CEO spot that you're at in the Chief Security Officer.
Yeah, no, it's been a very windy journey. It's funny. I talk to veterans a lot who are transitioning. They're like, "Well, how'd you get to where you're at?" And like, honestly, in hindsight, I can tell you the path. But at any step of the way, like I had no idea what was next, right? I came in, I joined the Marine Corps right out of college. I had planned to stay in there for a career and did for 22 years. Spent 22 years as an infantryman and reconnaissance officer throughout the Marine Corps, deployed all over the world. And then as I got towards the end of my career, I had command of a unit, and my wife is a PhD, got a job at Stanford. So we kind of did a pivot and came up to the Bay Area. I was basically an active duty advisor and mentor to a reserve unit. So basically when you have reservists who come in for their 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, you have an active duty cadre that kind of keep everything running when they're doing their civilian jobs. So they kind of come in on weekends, we do the high five and let them kind of take it from there. But when you're in those jobs in the military on recruiting or work with the reserves, they're very integrated in the local community. So you want to go out and kind of understand like, where it is you're living and what's going on. And I mean, I was in Silicon Valley, right? So I very quickly got kind of dunked into tech. I started working with Stanford students through a program called Hacking for Defense, where they try to solve really challenging military and intelligence community problems. Got into VC and PE and understanding that. And kind of did this kind of crazy pivot where I said, you know what, I really like tech. I use it, but I don't really understand it, right? Like I can order anything off Amazon, but what the heck happens once you press that button? So I ended up shifting over and got accepted to Brown and did a master's in cybersecurity with the thought either I would stay in the Marine Corps and be like the infantryman who understood cyber, which is really kind of a rare case, or I'd be going to Silicon Valley with like a little bit more of a tech background than I did. Through that process, I met the founder of Xenon Partners, Jonathan Siegel, who had a track record as a startup guy and then shifted into PE more than VC, where they were buying and turning around companies. So he brought me on board to be the chief security officer because a lot of those companies, we'd pull them on board. They'd have no security posture. They'd have a couple engineers and really no one else. So I started kind of providing that kind of umbrella of cybersecurity across the companies. Everything from, one, just getting the basic cyber hygiene right, making sure the configurations are right, giving them advice, and then also helping communicate security to customers, right? Every day now, if you're buying B2B SaaS, the first question you get before they give you your credit card is like, walk me through your security posture. So it was a lot of that sort of thing. So a little bit almost on the sales side. And in that realm at Xenon, we tend to be pretty big operators. Everyone in the group is kind of pulling. There's no one who kind of just sits up at the fund level and kind of supervises. We're all very hands dirty tactical. So for a while, I worked on a couple of password managers, Team Password and Teams ID. And then we brought in Package Cloud, the portfolio last year. So I stepped in to help kind of with the strategy and operations of that, and then moved up into the general manager CEO role October of last year. And that's where I'm at now.
That's awesome. If you're looking for someone who sits in that fund level, I know Shane and I are both open to job changes personally. I really would love to be at the fund level.
Chief Mingling Officer.
Yeah, the CFO, the Chief Fund Officer. I'm all for that.
We probably need some more of those. That's a great job.
Yeah, well, you guys do all the tactical stuff, and I'll have fun and show you what it looks like. So interesting. Again, you have, I would say diverse background. You might say not diverse, right? And, some people would say, well, hey, military, got to know Silicon Valley, cybersecurity. There's some linear path there.
Yeah.
I would say there's not. Personally, I'm like that. We meet a lot of CISOs and so on. I don't know a ton of them who are like, well, I transitioned from the Marine Corps to taking on cybersecurity. Although it happens. In fact, a cousin of mine, Secret Service, and then got into cybersecurity for some of the largest social media companies in the world. So had a similar, we'll call it law enforcement background, right, or whatever you want to call it, into cybersecurity. How do you see that jump being natural?
Yeah, honestly, the Secret Service, I've got friends who are there as well. And that's almost more of a natural, because we always think of the Secret Service in the personal protection realm, right? But a large part of their job is fraud, cybersecurity. So a lot of the folks in the Secret Service, like on one side of the job, they're stepping in front of the bullet to protect the president. The other side of the job, they're catching cyber criminals. So there is some natural thing there. For what I did in the Marine Corps, there are Marines who are really phenomenal guys in the cybersecurity offense and defensive world. That wasn't me, right? I was like the guy who painted his face and ran around with a rifle in the woods, But the one thing that I'll say that does line that up is kind of the mentality, right? And I think you can teach technical skill. It's a little hard to teach like the security mindset. And when I was at Brown, all my classmates were all, mid-level executives and cybersecurity professionals, a couple veterans, but mostly civilian. And I think the first couple of classes, I think I remarked to them, like, you guys are the most Marine people I've ever met. And they're like, what? I'm like, look, no one's going to mistake you guys for Marines. You don't look like Marines. You think differently. But like every time someone put something in front of us, like put an architecture diagram, put a product in front of us, their first thought was, I could break that. I could get around that. I mean, at one point they talked about physical security, and they started passing like padlocks around to give an idea of the different ways to lock. And one of my classmates, I see her fiddling around. I'm like, what are you doing? She has a lockpick set in her purse, and she's like picking the lock. I'm like, you just carry a lockpick set around? Like, yeah, why not? Don't you? So there's a little bit of that mentality that with the Marines, you're always teaching them like that perspective of like, see the surfaces and gaps with every situation. All right. Don't attack strength, find the weakness, go for that. So that mindset of constantly finding a way around things, find a way to break things, that is kind of what I mean by the security mindset, right? Is when I'm not the guy you probably want coding anything. Like I understand it, I can go through it with our engineers. But what my job is when they talk through the infrastructure and they say, here's how we're building this, it's my job is like, well, what about that? Like at that input, what are we doing to make sure someone can't, do some cross-site scripting there? What about that? Or if this shows up to a customer, what if they press that button? So I'm kind of the kid who like just presses the button you're not supposed to over and over and over again. And then in doing so, you start finding out, oh, wait, we got to think about a plan for that. And that's really what I think is really important is you talked about on one of your shows about like moving from tech and how, product management is a great role, right? You don't have to be doing coding, but you can help bring that creative mindset and that stuff in. It's the same thing with security, right? You work with your product manager, you work with your engineers, and you kind of highlight gaps they have and then kind of build the team to come up with a creative and collaborative solution to it.
That's interesting. That's kind of awesome. So I, kind of teetering even on keeping on to that like security mindset stuff, right? Like what were the things that just did feel supernatural? Because like, yes, there's like the real world environment of like, recognizing when people have unusual behaviors, but how did that really relate to like once you started like interfacing with engineers? Like how did you recognize and identify like these are the things that are probably the most vulnerable? Is that because of your education at Brown where they just kind of told you where the easy low-hanging fruit was and the easiest vulnerabilities, or how did you connect the dots there?
Yeah, it's a mix. I mean, at the baseline, right? Yes. Like just looking through like the OWASP top 10 and kind of the common things you see in web application software. But also, just in interfacing with our CISOs. I mean, we have a lot of CISOs in kind of private groups where we quickly compare notes when we see things. So there's a lot of continuing education. I mean, security is so big that, it's really hard to say you're an expert in everything. And I think one challenge you probably see with a lot of CISOs is they kind of have this imposter syndrome because like you don't know anything. You can't be an expert in cloud security, physical security, and all the things out there. In fact, one CISO I know, I blame who it was, she posted something the other day, which is great, where they're at a conference, they were talking about something, and it was super acronym heavy, and all the other CISOs there were writing notes down. And afterwards, like they were having the conversation, like, man, I gotta be honest, like I didn't have any idea what they were talking about. They're like, we didn't either. Like, well, you were writing down notes. Like we were writing down stuff to Google after the conversation. Like we had to look it up too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
you know,
it sounds like talking to my middle schooler. I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying, so I'll just look this up later.
Yeah. I mean, like when you work with engineers, I mean, too, it's like what I love about that is, I mean, the love-hate thing is one thing, right? Like when you ask an engineer, like, is this possible? Their answer is always yes, right? So you always have to ask the second question, like, okay, how much time and resources is it going to take to actually do that? And they're like, oh, it's going to take 50 years. So like, okay, so we're not going to do that.
But not in my lifetime. Well, and
right.
So we've done a lot of recruiting in the CISO space, right? And it's always interesting where like some CISOs, they're not engineers first, right? Some of them are just lawyers. They've got a PhD,
compliance and privacy
policies, etc. And so there really becomes like this. There's kind of two paths to that kind of like CISO suite, right? Which is like one is like heavy and legal, and I can talk to engineers, and I'm enough to know danger. Like I'm dangerous, and then there's engineers that wrote code and they dove into the weeds. I'm curious what your thought is on like the technical versus non-technical CISO kind of person.
Yeah, I think it really depends on the product and the company, because there are some companies that like, look, you can't have a non-technical CISO. You really need someone who's really going to be deep in the weeds there. But other ones, you can have a non-technical, and a lot of times you can have CISOs come from just varied backgrounds, because one of the great things, and this is where I think diversity is really critical, is security is an area where you really want to bring in different viewpoints and different perspectives, where no question's a bad one to raise that up. I think you also be aware of weaknesses, right? So like if you're a non-technical CISO, you better darn well have a deputy that is pretty deep in the engineering side, who you have a synergy with that you can kind of go back and forth and work with. The same way around, if you have an engineering heavy CISO, you probably want someone who's good in policy and privacy, who can engage with people and have that conversation and figure that out. Because what I always like to say is, cybersecurity, we tend to get caught up in like the big technical stuff, like the nation state hacks, the SolarWinds incident.
Yeah.
What we forget is like, it's about people, right? People build computers, people use computers. The vulnerabilities in the computer's doing exactly what you told it to do. It's the people who wrote the code and the people who use the code. That's where the weakness lies. And that's where sometimes having a non-technical CISO works really well, because they can think through those pieces. And if they're interfacing with someone who's talented on the engineering side, you can have a great synergy that can really build an effective shield for the company.
And it's pretty interesting as like how data is changing, how technology is changing. Like the CISO and the security space is radically changing a little bit too, right? Where you have like that penetration, SOC compliance. Like you've got that world, and you've got your data governance stuff, and then you've got your data privacy and your trust, and what is the difference between trust and privacy and all of these other different layers. And it's pretty interesting on how the security world is changing and evolving, and how it's going to change and evolve as people are adopting more identity access management systems that aren't home built. They're built through third-party services, and those integration pieces become more important than ever now. And adopting tools is becoming, a little bit more challenging as cloud services are dynamically changing. And and then you've got AI getting thrown into the mix to be able to go at a compiler level, where it's like, how do we understand like where those integration vulnerabilities are at a compiler level? Not even, cool, you've got great things, but there's issues underneath everything else. And how do you identify those and find those? And it's really interesting on how it's changing.
Yeah, Shane, I mean, the evolution is really critical. I mean, if you go back, 20 years, right, is like the first thing is like, we're going to build the internet. It's going to be awesome. And then it's like, who would screw with the internet? And then someone screwed with the internet. You're like, man, didn't think about that. Like email comes like, who would do fraudulent emails? Like apparently a lot of people. Now let's add SPF. Okay, now we need to add DMARC and DKIM. Like it kind of evolves up. And I think what's interesting is early on, right, security, they just stuffed the IT space. Like, go hand to the IT guys, let them figure that out. But it's moved, right? I mean, security is really like an existential business risk issue right now. So I think we have to kind of move past the perspective of like, it's just an IT tech issue. It's more of a holistic piece. And I think, even the other day, you're starting to see movements on the federal government side in the U.S. of saying, like, if you're a public company, you need to have someone with security background on your board, period. Because it's just too dangerous not to.
Yeah, well, and you've seen, like you mentioned, the big ones, the SolarWinds and so on, but it does. It creates. It actually can create a national security threat if you're that
Absolutely.
large of a company, and they're able to hack into your systems, find all your data. Release quite a bit. I've had my identity stolen, and I am sure I don't even know where it all came from, and which somehow I got put onto the dark web. I promise I don't go on the dark web, but somehow my name and social security is out there. And I blame the cybersecurity professionals. That's all I'm saying. So,
you bring up a good point. Like there's cascading risk, right? And I mean, I think that one of the things that Shane did mention is he's going through the different components of cybersecurity is third-party risk and supply chain management, which are really critical, right? I mean, like it's one thing if you sign up, like, okay, I know I'm going to give Google or Gmail my personal information, but like, who else is getting their information to make that software work, right? Because
the trickle down theory becomes crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like I looked on, like when I first came on in the security role, I said, the first thing I looked at is like, okay, how many software pieces are we using, right? Because no one's just using their software. It's like, oh, but my software's on AWS, but the application's hosted on Heroku. But I'm actually using MailChimp to contact my customers. And you very quickly realize, I think I came up with probably 150 different SaaS services that all were touching our companies, and then having to go through them like, what are you giving them? What do you need to give them? Like, why is this necessary? And then if you shift into like the engineering world, the danger is like, look, your engineers are lazy. And I mean that in a good way, right? Is they know that I could write this quick 10 or 15 lines of code to do this. It'd be much easier to borrow somebody else's code to do this and move on and be more efficient with the job, right? So what you end up doing is every piece of software is kind of this Frankenstein, this beautiful Frankenstein monster that does amazing things. But 10 to 20% of that is like super amazing intellectual property, new code that engineers made. The other 80% is stuff that's just been pulled all over the place. And what you don't realize when you compile all that together, like, okay, there's something I think, XKCD had a great cartoon where it's like, oh, that one thing all your software relies on is a 30-year-old 10-line piece of code that's no longer managed in a university repository somewhere, right? And when that falls, boom, everything comes out. So yeah, it's a big challenge. It's a huge challenge. And that's why, like, I think to your earlier point about technical versus non-technical, it's a team sport, and you need to bring in everybody. Anywhere you have a weakness, you got to bring people in to kind of bolster it up so you have a collective approach to it.
So you went from security, and you're still there. I'm not saying that you haven't. All of a sudden now you're a CEO. So it's a different role. I'm sure you think in a security mindset, but now you're sitting in the catbird seat, right? So you're the leader of Package Cloud. You're the person who's running it. How has that transition been different for you than just the person who needs to kind of specialize in vulnerabilities, like the fact that we have taken over your computer vision and we now have control of your camera. So how has it changed to be a CEO versus just in the security mindset?
Yeah, I mean, and go back to your earlier point about transition for the military. I mean, there was a little natural transition there. Is that I'd spent a lot of time in leadership and command positions, going up to organizations of up to 4,500 Marines and sailors around the United States. So, it is a different hat. There's an aspect of like, I have responsibility as a security officer to make sure we're safe and help engage that. But it's almost sort of like a consultant, like stepping in and helping other CEOs and other DROPs manage and figure out ways forward to say, hey, look, here's where your risk is. Here's the recommendations, like along this line. Here's the vulnerability, but the risk associated with vulnerability is relatively low. So focus on these other things right now. In that role, I'm kind of advising. There's certain things as a CISO, I'm going to stamp my foot. It's like, you have to do this right now. But you got to be careful with that, right? Because if you're hammering people every day, they're going to stop listening to you. In the CEO role, it's a little different. Now I'm back in the seat where I'm the one making those decisions, where I'm sitting there and saying, okay, I've got to do the priorities. I've got to build things out. And I think the biggest challenge, I think, when you're in a leadership and management position is figuring out how to delegate and supervise, right? Because you just can't do everything. On an early stage startup, you might have 2 or 3 people and everyone's doing everything, right? But as you grow, you've got to write things off. Like, I know I can do that really well, but I'm going to hand that off to this person, and I got to trust they're going to do that. And then kind of do that coaching and mentoring to bring them along. So we kind of move the whole, rise the tide, rise all the ships. So the challenge is like, yeah, it's on you. Like when the company fails or we don't meet our objectives, as the CISO, like there's certain things I have to report to the partners on, but realistically, our portfolio company is the ones having to make those decisions. When it's on me, I'm the one who's owning that responsibility. And if I screw up, hey, it's egg on my face. But more importantly, it's kind of screwing the team too, right? Because if the company gets damaged or the company goes down the wrong path, it doesn't hurt me. It hurts my teammates, and that's the real focus. Where it's a different kind of pressure, I guess, when you're sitting in that CEO and direct management role.
All right, so I'm gonna hit the brakes here, and I'm gonna shift hardcore into. All right, so now you're in this PE VC space, which I'm super intrigued by. I've done a lot of angel investing, haven't gotten obviously to the PE level or whatnot, but have a lot of friends in there. And so you guys at Xenon Partners, the I don't know size of it. How many partner companies are you working with over at Xenon?
Yeah, so we have 2 funds right now. It's our 4th and 5th fund. One is fully committed, and we're kind of growing and expanding and exiting those companies. The other one, which Package got in, is a new one, and we're still kind of looking for investments there. With Xenon, I think it's been kind of interesting because we take a little bit of different approach. A lot of times when you're in the PE world, like the VC is like, okay, I believe you. I'm going to throw a bunch of money, and you're probably going to fail, but your neighbor might pass and do well and be a 15x, and it's all going to work out, right?
Yeah.
But in that realm, VC, you're going to give them resources. You're going to help them. You want them to succeed, but you're kind of making like a roulette bet to some extent, right? PE takes a more aggressive role because they want to actually directly manage that. So whereas VC is hoping for this, PE can be happy in this realm, right? As far as your growth trajectory. So when you go in and you bring those in, you have some that are growth equity, like, okay, good company, doing well, but instead of going out and taking a bridge loan or something like that, we're going to come in and we're going to invest in you. We're going to take a controlling ownership. We're going to put seats in your board, but we're going to let you keep doing what you're doing, and we're going to give you extra funding to kind of expand that product or develop out. Others step in and bring in different types of playbook or management advice to kind of help grow. Xenon does it a little differently. We tend to look for diamonds in the rough. We start usually small B2B SaaS. It's all B2B SaaS, but like the 1 million to 4 million range. And we a lot of times look for companies that have stalled out. Sometimes a founder has been running it and kind of wants to do something else. Sometimes it's a VC fallen angel where they're like, hey, great company, but it's never going to be our 15x. We'd rather kind of like roll it off now and get this founder focused on something else, which will be more successful. And we kind of take those in and kind of retool them for kind of growth in marketing. So we really like focus like, okay, what's the one thing that really has really great product market fit here? And let's focus on that. And let's just redirect and rebuild the team and really hone the business operations to something that's going to be efficient and really kind of pitch the company up. So in that realm, we look at things a little differently than other PE firms. But because of that, we kind of can get usually pretty great companies that other people are missing and turn them around. And I think if I were to give you an image for you, the way we look at ourselves as mad scientists captaining a pirate ship, right? Okay. Because we're going to go around, we're going to find treasure where other people don't find it, right? We're willing to do some kind of crazy risks and do things other people aren't going to do. But we try to be scientific and data-driven about it. We're not going to just say, well, this is my gut. We should go double prices or we should go build this product. It's like collect the data, try to get to statistical significance. If you don't, I mean, if I get 5 data points, that's better than 0, right? In a bigger company, you're going to like, I want 10,000 data points when I make a decision. We'll make one a lot riskier, but we want to actually know what's the data that shows that. Where can we actually like make a bet here? And we're willing to take kind of those bold kind of bets on a company or on an idea, but we want to actually think through it. We want to be mad. We want to be mad, but scientists about it,
Yeah, no, I love it. I love the PE space. At least my brain thinks more in line personally. I should say personally, not business, but personally with that PE mindset of like you said, find that diamond and not just throw money at it. That's more the VC thought process of a financial investment. It's more that idea of, hey, we're also going to throw involvement at it to some extent, right? It's really take over and transition. We work with, similar to how you have been brought on from that put the security hat. We need you. As we take on these companies, we need a security hat to come in and help. there's also another side, right? It's the talent acquisition. That's what Sheen and I specialize in, is we bring in the talent hat of like, I got these companies, Donnie, you look at it and find their vulnerabilities and find the mess that they've made with cybersecurity and fix it. We like to work. We actually have some alliances with VCs and such where they come in and they go, hey, we have these partner companies. They got a bunch of money. They really need to bring on a really awesome founding team or redo their engineering team or whatever it is. And we come in and help them. How have you seen the talent acquisition side of things help spark any of these partner companies that you've had over in the PE space?
Yeah, no, it's tricky. So one of the things that we tend to do in most cases, we actually don't take the team. We actually take the product and rebuild the team from within, because we find, and this, I think you see this a lot of times with PE, when there's an ownership change, you're going to have a culture change there. And that's really hard. And that's no slight against anybody, but like if you're used to a certain business culture and that radically changes, it can be really give a lot of cognitive dissonance, and it's hard for that. So we usually try to bring in and rebuild our team from within. And when we do that, we have a core group of people that we have relationships with who are kind of like directors of operations who understand tech operations. And usually when I identify a company, we kind of bring them in and usually put one of them kind of to lead the due diligence and try to get to the point where we're running the company throughout that, and then kind of exit out. So once we're fully on board, the guy or gal steps into the general management position. So Package Cloud's a great example, right? Package Cloud, we take your package, your software packages, and we basically get it to your customers. So there's a huge issue we've talked about with supply chain integrity, right? And the critical issues that are out there right now, where you have kind of, how do you handle, source integrity on the code level? How do you handle build integrity when you're compiling that software and getting it out? And then how do you handle the deployment integrity where we're sitting to get that out to the customers and take that safely across? Because at any step in that process, there are critical vulnerabilities that have been exploited, which can be really, really dangerous. And we saw that as really a security issue. So when we brought Package Cloud on, like, who better to go step into a security role or run that company than the CISO, right? So that's kind of why we're like, hey, your talent aligns with this. Go in and start thinking back. So a lot of what I'm doing from the thought leadership standpoint here is, working with Google. They just released what's called the SALSA framework to talk about supply chain level artifacts and understanding how that works. And hey, if I've got your software, if I've got your repository, your download to get to your customers, what can I do to look back across that chain, look at your dependency tree, identify where your dependencies are, highlight to your developers where there might be vulnerabilities, but also, give you a software bill of materials, give your customers a software bill of materials. Tell the customer, hey, man, if you're going to download software, here's the things to be aware of. Or, hey, I know it supports 1.2 on up. You probably want to be on 2.0 of this dependency to move forward with this. So we're trying to now look back across that entire supply chain where you go your software package, and then we go back and look back into it in kind of a code ancestry perspective and say, okay, here's some things you need to be concerned about, to the point where now a developer, if they're going to upload a Package Cloud, when it pops in, we can go back and give an immediate feedback like, here's what your dependency tree looks like. Here's some vulnerabilities you should probably take a look at and make sure that that's the way you want it to be. And, here's some weird things, like back in this weird dependency here, here's a guy who has a GitHub profile with no followers and has only done 3 commits, and he put a critical line of code in this. You might want to go look at that line of code and just make sure that wasn't some kind of rogue commit into an open source dependency. It's going to have that domino effect down to your customer.
Which is exactly why you're the CEO there, right? Why Package Cloud? And it was like, hey, we're going to bring on this company. We think it's an amazing product. It's great. Hey, who's the best person to run it? It's going to be the person, because there is a massive security component to it. I love that. If I can steal some selfishly, I get to ask a question from me.
Go ahead.
We love working with the VCs. We love working with these heavily funded companies. How could we position our company, right? So we're this recruiting agency. How do we position it so that the private equity firms or the VC firms of the world look at it and go, hey, we want to bring them on to help partner, to help. And it could be something as simple as like to just give us ideas of how to find the best talent. Or maybe it's, hey, we're going to bring them on when we do buy a new company to go bring on the 3 founding engineers, the VP of engineering, right, the director, or whatever. Where is the value that we, and again, I'm asking this just totally like off the record.
This is like putting on the product manager hat of like.
I got it. Hey, I'm on your podcast, so like you feel free to ask me questions, right? So that's a great question. I think for Xenon, we've always been kind of a small team. If we look across our 12 companies or so, we probably have about 180 people across the whole group there, right? I think you've seen a couple different things. If when you go down one road, like if you think of like the really big like Silicon Valley firms like Andreessen Horowitz, Greylock, Sequoia, like some of these, they actually build an internal talent management kind of like marketplace, for lack of a better term, where they'll invite people to go in, you kind of put your profile up, and then you kind of sit there, and then when their company needs someone, they kind of go back through that, or let the company, hey, like I talked earlier, like I need a board member who has a security background. Okay, well, like let's go in and look at that. So that would be one interesting thing to say, hey, do I have people that aren't like, I'm looking for a job right now, but I'm open to other things, and build out kind of profiles there where when you do talk to a company, you say, oh, this is what you need? Take a look at our list of here. Take a look at the people. Like, tell me what you need, and now we're going to bring that group in and kind of give them the ability to kind of access that talent. Because I think that it's a little different on the P and VC side. Because like again, on the VC side, sometimes you're doing rapid scaling where you very quickly need to add talent fast. On the PE side, tends to be a more measured approach where you are going to need people, but you can probably do it a little slower and methodically. So I think the real question is when you talk to VC firms, like how do you bring talent in to support your companies, and how are you managing that kind of that marketplace? Is there a way that you can kind of provide that marketplace of talent where they can reach out, they can log in, and they can say, you know what, we'd really like to talk to these people about being on the board or filling this specific solutions engineering BP role we've got there. So I don't know if that directly answers it, but that's just some ideas off the top of my head that I'd be thinking about.
No, I love it. Again, we work with some, and it was all, we kind of stumbled into them through just prior relationships and customers that, loved us, told their VC partner, their VC brought us into a different company. So we have,
more like we've been doing more pro bono work where it's more of like, hey, we've got this group of people that have talent acquisition problems and they just want to talk through it, or we have diversity problems and they just want to talk through it, or we have X, Y, and Z problems. And so, we've done a lot of more, let's call it pro bono work for some of their portfolio companies to go, hey, we'll give you free advice. And some of them happen to turn into customers because they were like, oh, you guys know what you're talking about. This is fantastic. Let's do something. But like, we are looking at like, how do we get more involved, sometimes even at an earlier level where, maybe we are just giving away free advice and we're totally cool with that to help people understand what it means to scale properly from the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is probably a really critical question, Shane, is like, and if you look at, startup failures, it's oftentimes because they scale too slow or they scale too fast, right? It's finding that.
Or they scale with the wrong people. And they like, I have a failed startup, I'll be honest, right? Where I had this company that, in my opinion, had an amazing product, and we ultimately sold our patents and APIs just because there was differences on opinions on product direction between the founders. And, we had something amazing, and, there was one person selling the product being like, this is what the customer wants. And you have a CTO that's like, this is what I want to build. And those things went like this and ultimately created, this delusion of a company that could have been something really, really special.
From an angel perspective, the number one, and it's not even close, thing that I look for is the founder and founding team. That's about all. I have lost money on some of the best ideas with the worst founding members. And I have had major exits with ideas that I was like, this is kind of stupid and small, but I love the people doing it and driving it. And all of a sudden that sells to the publicly, traded company within 3 years. And I was like, I never would have guessed it. I love the people though. I love the team that was behind it and the way they think. And frankly, I'm sure that's how you feel about Xenon Partners. And we can understand that. It's like, when it's a rock star like you, I have no doubt Package Cloud is going to do fine. It's a good it's to me, the people are such a big part of it.
Taylor, I couldn't agree more. I think, and this comes from my military background too, like it's all about the team, right? And, Shane, you give a great example. I mean, like what you just described is exactly what happens in many cases to companies that struggle, right? And it's partly because there's different cultures, right? And we talked a little bit about like the security culture and the security mindset. We talked a little bit about the engineering culture and engineering mindset. Let's throw something else in there, like sales and marketing. Like, I probably have not seen a more diametrically opposed cultural group than like the sales and marketing and the engineering teams, right? In fact, I knew one company that was having so much friction, they actually rented another building and moved their entire sales team over there just so the engineers and salespeople never talk to each other, right? Because the sales guys are like banging gongs and like, yeah, get it, and the engineers are like, shut up and leave me alone. So the challenge there, and this is where you have to have that synergy, and when there's a co-founder situation, right, is you need someone who's going to be smart on the tech. You need someone who's going to be able to build something good. But you also need someone who can talk to people and really engage and actually think about how you're going to get product market fit and what's your ICP and how you're engaging on that, right? And that's not saying that can't be the same person or have both those skill sets. But what we often see with companies that crash, it's because, the runway starts getting short and everyone starts to panic a little bit. And as that's kind of coming up there, it depends. If it's like an engineering lead, sometimes what happens is like, hey, if you build it, they will come. We just need to get this feature or this product out, and it's all going to work. But you can't engineer yourselves out of a sales and marketing problem. And what often happens is like, hey, I don't like those sales guys. They're weird. Let's get rid of them so we'll get a little more runway. We have a little more time to get R&D on this. But that's just gonna steepen your downslope. So how do you get a case where you have the right team, you can be confident in the product market fit, and you focus on getting the momentum without like building extraneous products that we're not sure are going to work or going to sell? Because I don't know how many times, at Stanford or out here, I've had, Stanford students or new founders come in like, look at this thing I built. And you say like, that is super cool. It's amazing. I'm not going to buy it. Right. And they're like, and I mean, I talked to one the other day. He's like, I'm going to go in and I think there's a problem here. I'm going to fix it. I'm like, have you talked to people? Have you talked to the people who use those products? Like, no, but I know some of them are frustrated with it, and we're going to bring them in and collaborate and build a new one. I'm like, good in that there's a market for that because clearly people are buying and selling software in that realm. Bad in that like you don't have a clear perspective of what the problem is. And, in Hacking for Defense, we use Steve Blank's Lean Launchpad methodology to solve DoD problems. Inevitably, the Department of Defense and intelligence community will give Stanford University or another university a problem. We'll put students on it, and they'll start cranking through it. And by the week 4, they kind of go back and say, hey, you had the problem wrong, man. Like, you had a great solution in mind. We do solutions well. We do problems terribly. The solutions fail because we didn't actually think through the problem on the front end. And I think that's the key thing. Do you have a team that has the right mix of experience to truly understand the problem, to get the product market fit, and then stay focused on it until you get that revenue that you need?
All right, you mentioned Stanford. This is this whole time. This is really all I wanted to ask. So you're at the Hoover Institute, right?
Yeah, for this year through their Veteran Fellow program. It's a new program they just started this past year.
So tell me a little bit about like what is it that you're doing over there? What's that interaction? Because some of my favorite people to listen to, just their minds, the way they think, all would have that same badge on their LinkedIn profile. And so I'm gonna selfishly try to figure out how I get this badge on my profile because I think it's again some very, very, very brilliant people have that badge. So I want to hear what you're doing over there and so on.
It's kind of interesting, and it's wildly different than what I do in my day job, actually. So, Hoover, and just to be clear, like there's a lot of fellows at Hoover, right? There's like senior fellows like Jim Mattis, H.R. McMaster, John Taylor, just list out the like luminaries out there, right? And then you go down a few notches and you have researchers. And I'm down here, just to be clear, right, on the chain. But the reason why this came about, which is pretty fascinating, is, when Condoleezza Rice came back to Stanford and took over the Hoover Institute, her mindset was like, look, Hoover's never going to move away from the economics and the national security focus. Like that is really their bread and butter. And that's really, what kind of makes Hoover what it is. But the thing that she saw is there's a lot of division. There's a lot of issues in the country. And we really need to think about what can we do to help state and local government? What can we do to help people at the ground level? And, Dr. Rice's perspective was like, I think veterans are great people to do that. They're leaders. They understand things. So can we come up with a fellow program where we bring in kind of 10, rockstar veterans that can bring together, they can bring interesting problems, and they can use Hoover's resources to actually try to solve those problems. And we can kind of help help the United States and help our communities. So in that realm, from my Marine Corps background, I mentioned how on the reserve side, I had like a reserve counterpart. My reserve counterpart was a fire chief. His name's Dave Winokur. He's out here in Moraga, Orinda. Great guy. And he and I would just be talking, because sometimes in the military, like, you want the colonels to stay in the office and drink coffee and not kind of disrupt what the troops are doing. So like, we would sit there over a wetboard and say, we're in Silicon Valley. There's all this money. There's all this tech. We're still fighting fires like we did 100 years ago. Like, so what should we do? So we started coming up with ideas, right? And a lot of those ideas tend to focus on fire identification and suppression. So we started thinking, like, how do you fix it before that happens? In California, obviously wildfires are a huge issue. It's getting worse. And so what our pitch to Hoover was is like, we want to look at, what do you do before a fire starts? And really with fire, you've got climate, which you really can't do anything about. You got topography, which you really can't do anything about scale. And you got fuel. If there's no fuel, the fire's not going to burn. So we started researching a list of things. There's things out there you can do to, like, hey, remove the fuel and harden your home to prevent, things from like happening, from fires, from catching. So how do you get people to do good behavior there? And what we eventually came up with is approach it from the insurance market. Super volatile out here with fire insurance. And our thought process is like, how do we kind of leverage this in the right way so we can say, okay, fire is an abstract problem, insurance is an annual problem. Can we use that as an incentive to say, when you're getting fire insurance, can you accomplish these things to better protect your home and community? And then not only will you get fire insurance, but you'll actually reduce your premium. And then collectively, you build a community that's more resilient to fire. So I know that's kind of a crazy pivot off of what we've been talking about, but that was the whole thing. Like, can we use some of Hoover's resources when we talk about economic incentives and free market? And can we pull in, Dave's expertise in fire, my expertise in software, and how do we bind all this together in a way that can help kind of reduce the really catastrophic risk we're facing right now in the Western United States from fire?
So you can use my expertise as a podcast host and throw me on your thing so I can get the little Hoover badge, because I'm a huge fan of Condoleezza Rice, Victor Davis Hanson, and a bunch of others who would say they're, I don't know, you mentioned the totem pole. Maybe they're higher than you are. I don't care. You got the badge.
Yeah, but awesome. The great thing, the one thing I love about Hoover is how collegial and engaged people are there. And, when Dave and I walked in, we said, hey, we really need to talk to people about this. And very quickly, just got some amazing scholars and fellows to sit down with us. And, when you have a conversation like that with Neil Ferguson or you said Victor Davis Hanson, one of those individuals, like, they come up with a problem very differently than you do. And they're very smart about it. And that kind of just broadens your mind, both in where your gaps might be, but also it kind of widens your perspective of what's actually possible. So I think that's the great thing, is being able to actually sit down and have face-to-face conversations with people like that and really think hard about a problem and come up with a solution that's going to be a long-term solution that's going to benefit people and really change people's lives.
And I'm assuming that's helped you as a CEO, just kind of training your brain, not necessarily training, security patches that you need to put and stuff like that, but just in general, how your brain thinks out a problem and so on that you face every day at your day job.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think we all build heuristics over time on how we deal with problems. And I think it goes back to the diversity aspect and the team aspect, right? Like, if you think about problems a certain way, you're going to miss something. The key is can you bring other people in and get other perspectives? And sometimes they hurt to hear, right? Someone says, you should really think about this. Like, you're like, no, I don't want to think about it. But it makes you step back and say, okay, let me take it for what it's worth. Let me rethink about that. And you know what? There's an aspect of that that's correct. And there's an aspect of that I had a blind spot in. And I think that's the real thing. When you talk about tech, tech starts with a brilliant idea that's going to change people's lives. But what turns that into reality is the team, really, which kind of illuminates where there are blind spots, where there's strengths, and how do we kind of maximize our strengths and mitigate our weaknesses to really get that product to market and really put it in the hands of the right person that's going to give you, that's going to want to use it,
Yeah. So let's talk Donnie personally. Where are you from?
New Orleans, Louisiana.
Oh, wow. And now you're in the Bay Area.
Yeah, my wife's in the Bay Area, so I just kind of gradually moved out, and now I'm in California. So
opinion of Bourbon Street.
You know, Bourbon Street's great. I think the thing about Bourbon Street to a local is that's where kind of the tourists go.
Yeah.
It's always fun to kind of go down there. There's some hidden gems on Bourbon Street. I'll throw a shout out to one of my favorites, way down, Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop. If you haven't been there, it's just it's allegedly John Lafitte's blacksmith shop from the 1700s. It's just one of the coolest buildings out there, right?
It's interesting because like downstairs is a bar, which they make awesome drinks, and then upstairs is like a dance club.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's something different. There's no dance club in the blacksmith shop. I don't think. Maybe they changed it since I've been there. But to get your point about Bourbon Street, I would say like, look, when we were in New Orleans, we go to Frenchman, right? Frenchman's where you got the good jazz. It was kind of offshoot. It's gotten busier now, but there are so many cool things in New Orleans. You know, from music to food. I mean, like you could go out to the Ninth Ward to Vaughn's and listen to like world class musicians. Like Kermit Ruffins was there like every week. And just hear stuff you just never hear anywhere else. And just a super cool city. There's stuff for everyone there. But if you like food and music, man, you can't go wrong in that city. It's I don't think I appreciated it growing up.
We're in Nashville. Nashville and New Orleans, food and music, right?
Yeah. No slight to Nashville, absolutely. Like, and that's another great place. And I think you're right. Like, if it's food and music, you kind of just need to go up and down the Mississippi River and kind of like branch out from there.
When I went to New Orleans, I was a little disappointed because like I was totally down for like a really scary voodoo tour, because I went there for a Halloween, which is like right around my birthday. Yeah. All I found out is like voodoo is like a very peaceful thing. It's like it's like a Native American religion, and has nothing to do with what it is as it's advertised on. Yeah,
it's kind of a syncretic thing that came out of like the Caribbean and kind of blended with a lot of things. I mean, there's some weird stuff to voodoo, and if you want, I can give you some tours when you're down there if you want to get scared. There's ways to do that. You can go out to the bayou and almost get eaten by an alligator. There's a lot of options if you want to get that side.
Do you miss that? Do you miss that, like the swamp, the bayou, that kind of feel?
Gator bites, get some deep fried gator bites.
Yeah, I mean, alligator does taste pretty good. I think the thing that probably I don't miss about New Orleans, and this is my dad. My dad's from upstate New York, so a little bit of a different perspective. Like, don't miss the heat and humidity in the summer there. I mean, that's one nice thing about the Bay Area. The weather's there, but yeah, if you're in New Orleans in April or October, it's really hard to beat that place. From the people to the food to the music and to the weather on those two points of time.
I've been there in the summer, and it's hot. It's hot, and it is really humid. All right, and then you went to VMI.
Yeah.
What are your feelings on VMI? My closest friend played baseball at VMI.
Oh, really? Who was it when he graduated?
Josh Spradlin.
I'm trying to think.
He would have been there in the late 90s, I think.
So we probably would have crossed paths then, because that's when I was there from 93, 97. It sounds familiar. I'm trying to think if I don't personally know him, but it's a super small school, so you probably do kind of run in and know people.
Yeah, I would assume he got into a lot of trouble, but maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, I took a different path. Like VMI, look, I went there because I knew I wanted to be a Marine. I wanted the military school experience, and I got a lot of value out of that. I mean, the leadership you learn at VMI is really world class. I mean, it's like a daily leadership lab where you're testing things. It's tough, right? Because the thing is, when you're in the military, like, your subordinates are legally required to follow your orders, right? I mean, like, there's that different kind of relationship. When you're at VMI, like, they're your peers, they're your friends, right? So it's a whole different way to learn about how do you manage that? How do you manage being a friend with someone, but also telling them something that they don't want to hear, right? Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of things like that were super positive about my VMI experience. I think they've struggled a little bit in recent years with confronting some of the issues of racism and sexism that are, you would imagine, in being a Southern military college. But I'm also really proud of where they've come and where they've gone. And I got to be honest with you, that the graduates they're putting out are really just great people that are going to really provide leadership to our country, I think, in the way future. So I'm a big fan of the school's approach. It's definitely not for everyone. I mean, paying the state of Virginia to get yelled at is really not usually in someone's calculus is a good idea to do, but it worked for me.
Yeah, my buddy loved it. So, all right. So we just recently brought on a Marine, and we also have a Army guy, and we have someone who's in the Air Force National Guard. which one is the best of the three and which one you really like tomorrow.
Do you even need to ask a Marine that? I mean, come on, Taylor.
I just wanted for you to say the Marines so that I could show the video to the Army guy and be like, hey, we have outside representation has said.
Yeah, no, I of course I got to back my service there. I love the Marines. Although I'll say this, like the inter-service rivalry, it can get kind of hysterical at times, at home. But the thing that's been great is having served in Iraq, Afghanistan, coast around the world is what's awesome is when you're in a really, really bad situation, it doesn't matter what uniform you're wearing, right? And I think that, I've been in situations where the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, even the Coast Guard's bailed me out of situations, right? So I'm a huge fan of how we've kind of grown into a very joint force. And I think we all bring different talents. There's stuff the Marine Corps does that nobody does like us, and probably they don't want to do. And the same thing with the Army and the Air Force. So like I'll give a little more of the political response too, because like I've got a lot of friends that VMI sends guys in every service, right? So I got friends in every service and federal law enforcement. So I kind of have a more of a broader perspective, I think, on that.
Yeah, but I don't like your answer at all. We're going to go with the Marines are far better than the Army, and we will let our people know
that's an objective truth, Taylor. So I mean, that's fine.
Yeah. My little brother's finishing up at the Marines, and he'll finish his 8 years in like 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah, so you've got even another person to join on and show that the Marine Corps is better, right?
Yeah, no, I will say everyone, whether with any of the branches, it's like firemen and cops. They hate each other because they have to, but at the same time, they know they're both like taking care of the whole community and everything else. Same thing. I couldn't possibly do what a Marine does, or an Army guy does, or a Navy guy does. So we here at Next Level, myself personally, thank you for your service. Big fan of the veterans, so we appreciate it. Last question: what's your favorite movie?
Oh, geez, like I figured, I thought you guys were going to spring something like that on me earlier on. I'll see if you even know this one. I'm going to say The Razor's Edge. You know that?
I feel like I do know it. I don't know if I have seen it. So now,
okay, so there's two, and only because the book is my favorite book, right? It's by W. Somerset Maugham. There's an older Tyrone Power one, but there's a Bill Murray one, and it's Bill Murray in a serious role, and it's epic. It's not exactly in line with the book, but
oh my God,
there's kind of a great story with this too, Taylor. Like Bill Murray read the book and wanted to do this, and he went to I guess it's Columbia and said, I want to do this. And of course they said like, hell no. Like, we're not going to spend money. That's not going to make money. Like, no. And he said, okay, I'm not going to do Ghostbusters then.
Oh, nice. Nice. That's leverage, baby. Leverage.
Yeah. Leverage. So he blackmailed them into making this movie. And
you didn't have to watch it. I already like it.
Yeah. But here's the thing I'll tell you. This is my personal, like, I think you should look at it because it's not anything like groundbreaking. It's a little bit of a cult classic, but it is a great story and a great movie. And Murray plays it so well. And honestly, I think if you watch that, you can almost see that Bill Murray is actually Larry Darrell, the character in that. In every other role he plays, like he's channeling that guy in almost everything. And I truly think that like that had such kind of a crazy effect on his life that you can almost look at things like Groundhog Day and you're like, wait, that's kind of the same guy that was in The Razor's Edge. You can look at, Lost in Translation, like, no, that's also the same guy, so you can kind of see it. So it's worth looking at. It's a great book and it's a great story. And just a quick thing. It's about a guy who, had the perfect life and had everything lined up for him. And he actually went to war and had experiences in war and came back, and it caused him to question, said, well, what is the purpose of all this, right? I can do this and I can check all the boxes and have like the perfect life, but what does it mean? And what's the thing? And it kind of someone who really dug deep and kind of went down that path to say, I want to figure out what all this is about instead of just putting that away and kind of getting caught up in the day-to-day life. So, so check it out. Let me know what you think.
That's pretty awesome. I've been shocked that Bill Murray did a drama in 1984. Yeah. I know later on he really kind of moved into that, but 1984, Bill Murray, I will say, Chicago guy. I appreciate that. A little Chicago connection. Him and I are like brothers.
Chicago baseball, man. He's great.
Yeah, but I'm a Sox fan. He's a Cubs fan, so we would not agree on that.
I'm glad you didn't ask because I'm a Yankees fan. My dad's from New York, so that would have probably.
You know what? I don't like the Yankees, but my whole family is from the East Coast. My grandma's a huge Yankee fan. I hate them because they beat the Sox more often than we beat them, but I can accept the Yankees. I can even accept the Red Sox. I just hate the Chicago Cubs. Hate them with a passion. So Donnie, this was awesome. I totally appreciate you are our first Hoover Institute Fellow, which I'm super jacked about having on. And again, Donnie, Chief Security Officer at Xenon Partners and CEO of Package Cloud. Is there any way that you can have the millions of people who watch connect with you, or what they can do for you, whether they're looking for a new job or they want to pick your brain about the security side of things?
Yeah.
How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably the best way to do it, and I try to get back to you as soon as I can. And if you're in the tech space and you need to get your software out to your customers, and you need a place to kind of have all your packages and repositories in one place, please reach out. I think the software is one of those things where it's really great, and I'm really excited to see where we're going in the software supply chain space, and to truly bring software supply chain integrity to the tech space. So if you need that, we'd love for you to be our customer. If you want to talk security stuff, ping me and talk me. And then if you want to just connect on other issues, yeah, reach out anytime. It'd be great to meet you and your audience.
Yeah, this was awesome. I'm going to get you connected to my buddy from VMI and my cousin who's in the cybersecurity space too. I think you guys would have a lot of fun just chatting. So yeah, this was awesome, Donnie. I thank you so much for joining. Shane and I and Next Level, we say thank you for your service. Thank you for joining us. And you got to help me get a badge from the Hoover Institute. So, all right. Thank you again, Donnie.
Right. Great meeting you guys. It's been a great conversation. Thanks.
Nxt In.